Hey everybody, Dr. V here. So glad you're here. Jump into the chat, say hello, and we're going to get started here in just a couple of minutes. We've got some really great stuff for you tonight, and so thank you for coming. Anne, do you want me to go ahead? Is there anything that you want to talk about before I start showing the slides?
Let's see. So, I will just say a couple things. For those of you who joined us for the wheat zoomer interpretation last time, these two labs go hand in hand. The wheat zoomer test, it's really great to do that when you do the gut zoomer, and vice versa. They go hand in hand. And I saw a couple people say in the chat, well, I don't eat wheat anyway. I've been gluten-free for years. I don't need that test. I beg to differ. 99% of people who say they're gluten-free are getting hidden gluten in the food that they're eating. If you're eating out ever, you're getting cross-contamination unless you're eating at 100% gluten-free restaurants. So it's still beneficial to do that test, even if you think you're gluten-free. You just might be surprised. So again, you're going to see on the interpretation tonight of the gut zoomer, there's a couple areas where you'll actually cross-reference a wheat zoomer test, or we would recommend you have this on the gut zoomer, you should also look at a wheat zoomer test. So that's the reason that we offer them together, and it's a benefit to just do them at the same time.
Yay, perfect. All right, let me go ahead and jump into the screens. Let me know if you can see that.
Yes, I can see that. So how many of you here tonight, lower your hands, let's everybody lower their hands. How many of you have your gut zoomer and you have your results there in front of you and you're going to be following along as we're interpreting? Good. Okay, everybody lowered hands. Everybody raise your hand again. If you're following along, if you have your gut zoomer results there with you. We offered a special on these tests end of December. So some of you probably just got your results, or maybe you're still waiting for your results. So good. We had about 15 people at the most that had their hands raised. So the gut zoomer test, it's really comprehensive. It is looking at your overall flora in your gut, your microbiome. And so let's get started. Let's move on to the first slide. So the gut zoomer actually looks at more than 170 species of gut bacteria. We have way more than that. We have millions of bacteria, viruses, microbes, all sorts of things in our gut. The gut zoomer test specifically looks at 170 species of gut bacteria. And this test can be a really great tool for uncovering root causes. If you guys have been with us for a while, or you're in one of our programs, or you've worked with our team already, you know that that's our approach. We're looking for root causes. We're not trying to diagnose you with anything. We're looking to uncover why are you having the symptoms, issues, disease that you have, and how can we fix it? How can we get to the bottom of it? So the gut zoomer is really great for anything gut related. If you have any kind of gut related symptoms, yes, toxins could be an issue. You hear us talk about toxins often, but there could be things going on in the gut that are not related to toxins. So that's where the gut zoomer can be really handy. So let's look at factors that affect our gut health and diversity. If you take a lot of medication, multiple prescriptions, the more prescription medications you take, the more likely that is to cause imbalance or disruptions in the bacteria in your gut. The longer you take those medications, the more likely you are to have gut issues. If you do PPIs, antacids, proton pump inhibitors like Zantac or Prilosec, if you've done those for 3 months or longer, I know many people who've been on those for years, that affects your gut diversity, affects your gut bacteria in a negative way, not in a good way. If you have a history of a lot of antibiotic use, not only does antibiotics wipe out the bad stuff, which is good, right? That's needed. Antibiotics are often needed and beneficial. But when we take antibiotics repeatedly, not only are we wiping out the bad stuff, we're wiping out all of our good bacteria. And then a lot of people don't know that after antibiotics, you need to repopulate your flora. So I especially find this with kids who have a lot of antibiotic use as babies because they get ear infections or whatever it is. We're setting those kids up to have major gut issues later on in life if we don't repopulate their flora after they do antibiotics. And in many of those cases, there's alternate things you can do where antibiotics aren't even the best choice. A history of heavy alcohol use that disrupts your gut flora and your gut diversity. I'll throw caffeine in there too, because excessive coffee day after day after day for year after year can also affect the pH of your gut and your gut flora. Excess heavy metals in the body. When we have certain bacteria that are not so friendly, many of those bacteria feed on heavy metals. Heavy metals is food for many of those pathogens. So when we have a lot of heavy metals, that can be feeding the bad stuff in our gut. Foodborne illness. You're on vacation, you get some kind of food poisoning that may pass after a couple days or a week, but you've changed your gut flora when you got food poisoning. So you want to repopulate. Many people don't know, repopulate your flora after you have any kind of foodborne illness. Chemical and mycotoxin exposure affects your gut diversity. You guys hear us talk about that all the time. Did your parents or siblings have gut issues? And this is an interesting one. So think about this one. Many families have similar gut issues. Why? Because we're exposed to the same viruses, exposed to the same bacteria, we eat the same foods. And so we often have similar microbiome makeup or bacteria makeup in our gut. When you look at mother and child, whatever the mother's microbiome is like when she's pregnant, the baby is born with a very similar microbiome. So the gut of the mother affects the gut of the baby. And that's why parents and child often have very similar microbiome. And then trauma and stress. We know that stress repeatedly over time affects our gut health. It causes inflammation, which in turn affects our diversity. So I thought it was important to go over all the factors that can affect our gut diversity, because when you're looking at your results, there's going to be areas of the test where you need to figure out why. Why does the test look like this? Why do I have this inflammation or these issues in my gut? So just be aware of the different things that affect your gut diversity.
And there was one more thing too that it's so easy to forget this one, but when a mother has a C-section and the baby does not pass through the vaginal canal, right? I'm sorry, I can't talk. You and I, Ann, talked about that a couple of months ago, where you were talking with a client about that and their kid was having an issue. And it turns out that, upon taking a really good history and, really figuring things out, that she had a C-section. So, and that can be a very common cause of young babies having like that severe eczema when they're, like soon after they're born. Do any of you have that experience? Raise your hand that somebody or your own child has or had this severe eczema and skin rashes, or of somebody. It's so common now. These babies are covered in these rashes, and it's because their gut microbiome got really messed up during that whole process because they never got to pass through the vaginal canal and collect all that beneficial bacteria as the baby would have otherwise had that natural birth.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's a great point to add. And you know what? I'll add to that too, because breastfeeding, incredibly beneficial after a baby is born, because what that colostrum does in the first few days after baby is born is that's what helps seal the junctions in the baby's gut to help then further enforce their gut health and kind of seal in all that bacteria. So breastfeeding goes hand in hand with that as far as the birth process. So let's look at the actual test. If you have your test in front of you, I've divided this kind of into sections. So we'll go section by section and talk about what each section is on the test and about its relevance. So the first section, this is up at the top on the very first page of your report. This is looking at our diversity. Diversity is so important, as we just talked about. The healthier your gut is, the more diverse your ecosystem, the stronger your immune system is. The better you're going to be able to fight off viruses and other negative things that you come into contact with, as far as bacteria and parasites and all of that type of thing. So there's 3 different ways that they look at your diversity on this test. And on that first section where it says gut diversity, there's 2 different scales there: Shannon's index, Simpson's index. The name of those things don't really matter. What we're looking at is what's your score. And so they're measuring by a scale of red, yellow, green, which this whole test measures that way. You're aiming for green. So this particular person's test, on both of the indexes of gut diversity, they were in the red on one, meaning very low diversity, and in the yellow on the second, meaning moderate diversity. So this person really needed to work on increasing their diversity. That middle little box is looking at the percentage of the types of flora that you have. And then that last box, the key ratios, is also looking at your ratios of diversity. So you kind of look at this all together, and you're mainly looking at that first box of gut diversity and seeing, is my gut diverse enough? If it's not, you want to think about probiotics. Are you currently doing probiotics? If so, which ones? And we'll talk about that in a minute. And what does my diet look like? Because if our diet is not very diverse, it's likely that our bacteria is going to be less diverse in the gut if we're not getting a big variety of foods. You also want to think about fermented foods and, all those other things that we know can increase our gut diversity. So the next part of the test, this chart, is looking at the amount of normal gut flora you have, quote unquote, normal gut flora, associated with different disease states. And they have some disease states listed here: intestinal permeability, cardiovascular health, metabolic health, and so on and so on. Many people look at this section and they get worried and they think, oh my gosh, this is telling me that I have an autoimmune issue, or this is telling me that my cardiovascular health is not good. I must have heart issues. That is not how you want to look at this. This is not diagnosing you with anything. This is telling you, in relation to those disease states, is your bacteria healthy? So for example, this person's test, their metabolic health was in the yellow. So all the bacteria that we know through scientific study over the years of the microbiome, all the bacteria that we know give us really strong metabolic health, this person is lacking in some of those bacteria. Same thing with autoimmune health. All of the bacteria that we know is good for fending off autoimmune health, this person is lacking in some of that bacteria. So this chart is really to help give you an idea of what disease states or symptoms you might see, or you might already have some of the symptoms associated with the areas of this test where you're in the yellow or the red. So it's not something to be really worried about when you see it, but it does point you in the direction of what bacteria and flora do I need to work on in my gut. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go further into the test. So underneath that little chart, you're going to see some personal suggestions for you. And this person's suggestions are pretty lengthy. There's a couple dozen supplements that they recommend, like 4 or 5 different types of probiotic that they recommend. I don't advise that you run out and buy all of these things and start taking all of these supplements. You really want to work with a practitioner who's trained and experienced in the gut zoomer to be able to pick through this and look at what came out on your results and really help devise a protocol that is small enough that you're not taking 30 things every day, but still addressing all the most important parts of your results. And a lot of these things also can be addressed through diet and diet shifts. And so working with a practitioner, really helpful to give you clear direction on what do I do with all of these results. But this does give you a good idea of some of the things that will help the different areas on your tests that are out of balance. So this next part of the test is probably my favorite part of this entire gut Zoomer test. This is the part that everybody wants to see when they get their results back. This is looking at the pathogenic organisms. So the parasites, the worms, the fungi, the viruses, the bacteria. This test looks for 67 different organisms, and all of those are listed at the end of your report. You'll notice that your report is very long. It's 30 pages at least, if not 40, and sometimes longer than that. We're only going to go over the first 10 pages or so, because the rest of that is the list of all the things that they're looking for. So I always find that really interesting to just go back to the end of the report and kind of thumb through and see what it is that they're testing for in all of these categories. But for many people under the gut pathogens, they'll just see no pathogens detected, meaning nothing in excessive amounts was picked up. For this particular test, this client had two things. They had some E. coli bacteria, and they had some parasites, some protozoan parasites. And so we developed a protocol for this client specifically for this type of bacteria and these parasites. And in the comments, what I love about this test is they give you some examples of some of the antimicrobials or herbs or even foods in some cases that are great for addressing those particular types of parasite or bacteria. So here you'll see I won't go too deep into the numbers, but you can see the reference range, and then you see the current. And if it's in the red, obviously that's extreme. And then if you've done a follow-up test, you'll see the current and the previous. And so if you do come back with some things listed here, it's a good idea to do your protocol, address the infection, and then test again later to make sure that you actually got rid of it. With parasites, worms, all of these things actually, parasites, worms, fungi, bacteria, they all produce biofilm. So if you have multiple things here under the pathogens, you likely have biofilm. And so you could potentially have things that aren't being detected just yet, because you have biofilm. And so I've had a client do a gut Zoomer. We saw pathogens, we did a protocol, we retested, and then those original pathogens were gone, but there was something new. And the client got frustrated and said, well, where am I getting all these exposures? And, it's my thought that those things were probably there. They're likely there, buried in the biofilm. So just know, as you're going through this process of really cleaning out the gut, I like to refer to it as kind of like an onion. You're peeling off the layers of the gut to get it really healthy. You may see other things come out later on that weren't on an original test.
How many of you have ever noticed mucus coming out in your stool? Raise your hand. It's like mucusy, kind of right? That's a huge sign of parasites or other co-infections. Even mycotoxins, toxic mold builds up a lot of this slimy substance, and it sticks to the inside wall of your intestines, and it's very sci-fi-ish. So like what happens is that these bugs, these things that don't do well in our ecosystem that Anne's talking about, they'll produce biofilm. Some pathogens produce more biofilm than others. The Lyme spirochete, if you have Lyme disease, mold, different types of parasites. They can produce way more biofilm than bacteria. And so they'll produce this because it's their shield. They can burrow themselves inside of there at different layers of the biofilm, and they hide from the immune system. So the immune system knows something's there. It keeps sending the troops, the different white blood cells to the area, but the white blood cells message back to the main headquarters of the immune system and say, we know something's here, but we don't know what it is. And we don't know if it's viral. We don't know if it's bacterial. We don't know if it's parasitic. And so, like Ann said, as you start breaking down layers of the biofilm and you expose these different pathogens that are living in the different layers, then you'll like kill that layer off, and then you'll get to the next layer of biofilm. So sometimes we add biofilm breakers to your protocol to help break that biofilm up. And one of our products that we put a lot of our clients on, it's called TCG activation. That also, one of the many things that it does, it has so many benefits. And one of the many things it does is it does help to break up biofilm.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I'll also, one other thing about that other slide, you saw listed there, antibiotic resistant genes. This test can also tell you if you have any of the antibiotic resistance genes. I don't see that very often in the results, but it does test for that. And you can see at the end of the test, end of your report, the different ones that it tests for. So the next page, you will see your gut inflammatory markers. This is the section labeled inflammation. All of these different markers here are picking up inflammation in the gut. Different, I won't say different types of inflammation, but it could have different root causes. All the things here can, in some cases, point us in the direction of what's causing the inflammation. It's one thing to know you have inflammation in the gut. It's another thing to kind of have an idea of where that inflammation is coming from. And that's what helps you figure out what's the root cause of the problem. So the first one at the top, calprotectin, this is not determining the source. This isn't telling you where the inflammation's coming from. It's just telling you your degree of inflammation. So this person on their previous test, they had moderate inflammation, and now they're back in the normal range on their retest. The fecal lactoferrin, when you have this elevated, this is a sign that you have likely either some gram-positive or gram-negative bacteria in excess in your gut, in your microbiome. The body produces fecal lactoferrin when there's some kind of imbalance there. And it's antiviral, it's antiparasitic, it's antifungal. And so you could have any of those things if your fecal lactoferrin is high. It could be high because of a gram-negative or positive bacteria, because of a virus or a parasite or a fungus or a mold. So that one's kind of general in a sense. It is giving you an idea though. The beta defensin 2, this is actually a peptide that the gut produces. It's an antimicrobial peptide. So the gut will produce beta defensin 2 when there's either gram-negative bacteria or there's a lot of candida or yeast. The lysozyme, this is an enzyme produced by the gut that breaks down gram-positive bacteria. So that's specifically gram-positive. The beta defensin is gram-negative. And the lysozyme is also a marker for inflammation in the colon, as opposed to the small intestine. So that's kind of giving you a little more direction on where your inflammation is. It's deeper into the digestive tract. It's all the way down in the colon. The S100, A12, so people who have irritable bowel disease, this will be high for many of those people. It's a marker of irritable bowel, which there's many root causes of that. So you do kind of have to dig and figure out, well, why is there irritable bowel? The MMP9, this is a repair enzyme. And so this is elevated when there's been some GI damage, some damage in the gastrointestinal tract. This is common that it's high in people with ulcerative colitis, but there could also be GI damage for other reasons. Sometimes parasites can cause GI damage, or mold can cause GI damage. A person who is eating wheat and gluten and they have GI damage. So this could be for many reasons, but it is common in people who've had an ulcerative colitis diagnosis. And then the last one, the fecal eosinophil protein, this is either food sensitivities, food allergies, or parasites, or both in many cases. So I really love this section of the test because it does point us in some direction. It kind of gives us an idea of root causes so we can dig a little bit deeper. All right, so the next section, it's called Markers of Digestive Insufficiency and Malabsorption. It's looking at how we're actually digesting our food. So that little top section, the pancreatic elastase, that will be decreased when your pancreas isn't producing enough enzymes. So there's a couple reasons that could be. You could have pancreatitis. You could be dealing with gallbladder issues like gallstones. Maybe you have diabetes or blood sugar imbalance, or maybe you're not aware that you have blood sugar imbalance, but that's a cause. Excessive alcohol use will cause this, and then celiac. And here's where I revert you back to the wheat zoomer, because on the wheat zoomer, there's a marker for amylase protease inhibitors. And so those people who have that elevated, that peptide elevated on the wheat zoomer will very often see their pancreatic elastase is decreased. So you'll see the connection between the wheat reaction and how that's affecting the way that you actually digest and absorb your food. So you also see meat fibers and vegetable fibers listed there. So you can see for this person, they're digesting those things just fine. If it's out of range, it'll say detected, and that means your body's not able to break down those foods completely. So enzymes are a good idea, or bitters to help you break down the food. Sometimes it's chewing. Sometimes we're not thoroughly chewing our food, or we're eating too fast. If you eat at a desk or you eat in the car and you're shoveling, sometimes that's the reason that you see meat fibers and vegetable fibers. So mindful eating is something you want to think about if that showed up for you. The next section, the fat malabsorption. If things are high here, that's an indicator that you're not breaking down your dietary fat very well, or you're not converting it and utilizing it. It's not being utilized by the body. So this kind of points to the liver, the biliary function. And so you kind of want to dig a little bit deeper. You also want to look at how much fat are we eating? Because believe it or not, for some people, too much fat can be really hard on the digestive tract. So you also want to think about diet. But this test will recommend a couple things there. As you can see, if you have things elevated in the fat section, it's going to recommend some enzymes, maybe some pancreas support to help, some enzymes to help break down your fat. So the next page is sort of a continuation of looking at the fat. We're looking at the bile metabolites. So bile produced by the gallbladder, and the bile will help, digest. It helps our body digest and absorb the fats, not only fats, but fat soluble vitamins. So if you have things out of range here on the bile acid metabolites, or even on the section before in the fat malabsorption section, you want to consider possibly doing a micronutrient test, because your fat soluble vitamins you could be deficient there. So vitamins A, E, D, K, maybe I'm missing one. Those for sure. I might be missing one or two, but you want to consider, am I having nutrient deficiencies in those things? And so if you're not breaking down and absorbing and utilizing your dietary fat, there's a chance if you're taking fat soluble supplements, you might not be utilizing those correctly either. So you want to consider that. And a micronutrient test is a good idea. And so the bile also helps eliminate waste from our body. It helps in our digestion. So if you see elevated metabolites in this section, if you see anything elevated in this section, it can indicate fat malabsorption. It can be a sign of some conditions like Crohn's, celiac, issues with your pancreas, or SIBO. All of those conditions can cause issues with your bile metabolites. And you want to consider then supplementing with bile acids while you figure out the root cause. Liver and gallbladder support is also really wonderful. Liver supporting foods. So from a dietary perspective, doing a lot of liver and gallbladder supporting foods is also a good idea.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
We have Janet who's asking a quick question. And guys, if you have questions, put it in the Q&A so it doesn't get lost. But this is really relevant to this. And I'm sure there are probably many people here who have had their gallbladder taken out. Would this also be a good test for them to see how their gut is functioning when they don't have their gallbladder?
Absolutely. So many people have their gallbladder removed and they're never told that they need to take something or do something to help support the breakdown of fat. Many people are just told, don't eat fat, avoid fatty foods, avoid fried foods. And while yes, that's a good idea, we need fat. Every cell in our body needs fat. Our brain needs fat. So healthy fats like avocados and, coconut and olive and those types of fats. For someone who's had their gallbladder removed, it's an issue to break those things down in most cases. So yes, you do likely want to be taking some bile salts or some TUDCA, something like that, that's going to help you break that down. So,
exactly. Yeah. And, doctors typically won't tell you that because it doesn't come in a prescription. It's natural. So what they end up telling you to do is to change your diet and take fats out. And fats are essential to your health in your life. You have to have fats. Fats are so healthy. You need them for so many reasons. And so, it's kind of sad that happens because then people end up having a host of other issues that can happen to them because now they've changed their diets and they avoid fats like the plague, simply because it wasn't a prescription. So the doctors were not allowed to tell you, or in some cases, they just haven't been trained in that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then in most cases, removing the gallbladder anyway is very unnecessary. There's a lot of people with gallstones and gallbladder issues tend to have toxins they don't know about, gut imbalances they don't know about, food reactions that they don't know about. And so if those things were just addressed first, in many cases, a client wouldn't even end up having a gallbladder removed, right? But if it's already been done, it's done. You can't change it. So make sure you're supporting the digestion process and doing some really good support for breaking down your fats. So the next section is looking at short-chain fatty acids. So short-chain fatty acids are actually byproducts of our gut bacteria. When we eat insoluble fiber, the bacteria in our gut creates short-chain fatty acids from that food. This is a great example of bacteria and the human body working hand in hand for a process. And so short-chain fatty acids do a lot of things, and you see them listed here in bullet points. They actually promote new cell growth in the intestinal lining. So in many ways, they help heal the gut. Short-chain fatty acids are anti-inflammatory. They help expand our T cells. They heal and seal leaky gut. So this is part of the process of healing your gut, is making sure you have enough short-chain fatty acids. And they can actually improve whole body glucose tolerance and insulin sensitivity, which is really fascinating. So you'll see listed here the different short-chain fatty acids: acetate, butyrate, probably the one that people hear most often, propionate, and valerate. And then you'll see your total short-chain fatty acids. So oftentimes you'll see the test like this, where your total is good, but 1 or 2 out of the list of 4 is a little bit low. So I like to look at total. If our total is in a good place, we're good with our short chain fatty acids. In many cases, you can switch up diet a little bit to help increase your short chain fatty acids. So you can see a list there on the test. It shows you some foods that are good for increasing the short chain fatty acids. Many of those foods, like legumes, rice, potatoes, are not part of an anti-inflammatory diet. So if you're detoxing and you're doing an anti-inflammatory diet, it can be challenging to add in some of those foods if they're going to cause issues in other areas. So there are supplements. There are supplements that you can do to help increase short chain fatty acids. But as you improve your flora, your numbers are going to go up. This is a section where there's another correlation with the wheat zoomer test. If you have a lot of reaction on the wheat zoomer, that can actually decrease your overall short chain fatty acids. So there is a connection there. And this is where looking at diet is important. How much insoluble fiber are we getting? And are we getting enough? So here are some reasons why your short chain fatty acids might be low. So if you're having diarrhea, so if you have diarrhea because you have some pathogens or you have mold or you have something going on that's causing diarrhea, then you have rapid transit, meaning your short chain fatty acids are just leaving the body as quickly as the bacteria is making them. If you have constipation, then the short chain fatty acids are sitting in the digestive tract longer. And so you have increased absorption. High calprotectin, so inflammation, can cause the short chain fatty acids to decrease. Lots of antibiotic use. Diet. So when we decrease our carbs, when we go on like a no carb, low carb diet, you want to consider doing some supplementation so that your short chain fatty acids stay at a decent level. And then severe dysbiosis. If you have really bad leaky gut, you're likely going to have things in this part of the test that are out of range. And so let's look at the last section, which are other markers, other important gut markers. Each of these is a little different, looking at different things. The first one, SIGA. So when your SIGA is high, this is telling you immune upregulation in the gut. So your immune system is reacting for some reason. If it's low, if your SIGA is low, it could be because of chronic stress, or any of those infections, a long-standing viral infection, bacteria imbalance you've had for a very long time, or parasites that have been there for a very long time. So you want to look at, is your SIGA high or is it low? Because that means different things. The B-glucuronidase, that is signs of anaerobic bacteria. So things like Clostridia or Shigella, and there's a couple of others. So when that's high, you have some type of bacterial infection going on. The fecal occult blood, when you notice blood, that means there was blood in your stool. That means you're having blood loss somewhere in the GI tract. So anytime I notice that on one of my clients' reports, I make sure they take this and show their GI doctor if they have one, or their medical doctor, because you want to make sure you consider all the reasons why you might have bleeding in the GI tract. You know, you want to rule out anything really serious that needs medical attention, but having excessive parasites can cause blood in your GI tract. You know, having excessive damage because of gluten exposure over time can cause blood in the GI tract. So it doesn't always indicate something very serious, but I say just play it safe and let your doctor know about that if there's blood in the stool.
And there are going to be times too where your doctor, you know, I just spoke with a client today in Australia about this. He was having blood in his stool. He ordered this exact test. You know, his doctors had done a lot of extensive testing. They did a colonoscopy, they were looking, and they kind of came back and said, we have no idea. But then we ended up running this test, and we found that he has He has some protozoa, like a high level of protozoa, which are parasites. It's a type of parasite, but it's not a worm parasite. It's very small, like you can't see it. He had that in his gut, and a few other things. But that combined with some other things that we found, we were able to find why he was having that. We ended up putting him on a specific gut protocol, and the bleeding has almost stopped. So there's almost nothing left. We're going to keep working with him for a few more weeks, and then we're going to retest. And so just so you know, sometimes the doctors, they don't find anything, but that doesn't mean that we can't help you find what's going on.
Yes. The next one is pH, and this is just looking at the acidity, the acidity of your stools. Zonulin, we know that one. That's the marker for leaky gut. So you can see your zonulin level. And then the fecal anti-gliadin. If you joined us for the wheat zoomer class, then that name sounds familiar. This is one of the peptides for gluten and wheat sensitivity. And so when this is elevated, you definitely want to run the wheat zoomer, because this is just one of 26 peptides. What about the other 25? What else are we reacting to on the wheat zoomer? So this is one of the reasons that these tests really go hand in hand. And I've seen clients have this be in the green, the fecal anti-gliadin be in the green, yet on the wheat zoomer, because that's a blood test and it's much more sensitive, their anti-gliadin was off the charts on the wheat zoomer. So don't go by just this fecal anti-gliadin marker and say, oh, I must be fine with wheat because that was normal for me. I still say consider doing a wheat zoomer, which is why we love those tests together. So after that, you're going to see the rest of the report. And I've kind of talked about this already. You're going to see 4, 5, 6, in some cases, 10 pages that's showing you all the different breakdown of the types of bacteria that this test is looking for and where your levels are. And then you're going to see the list of the different pathogens, the list of all the viruses they look for, list of all the parasites and all the protozoans that they look for. So the rest of that report is really just kind of for your information. I find it super interesting. So, take some time to just look through the rest of the report, and see what's there. So I think we can do some questions now, Dr. V, unless you want to talk about this. You want to talk about the special pricing?
Yes, let's go ahead and do that, because people started asking, like on the first slide, there were some people asking, how much is the lab? So we're really excited about this. And we talked about it 2 weeks ago. We're really excited about this pricing. And let me tell you why. Erin, I might have you, or Tara, I forget what the gut zoomer is, what the price is for that. But let me tell you, the price for the gut zoomer is like $1,100. No joke. It's so expensive. It's so expensive. And there is something called a GI map that's considerably less expensive, but it doesn't look in the depth that this one looks. Not even close. Not even close. And we used that one for a long time. And we would combine that with some blood work, with some genetics, with some, we would start combining a bunch of labs together, putting the pieces together, when at the end of the day, it came out to be, like the same or more. When this one came out, we're like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing lab ever. Like, we love this one, but the cost is so expensive. Can one of our team tell us how much that the wheat zoomer is?
I think it's 5 something, if I remember correctly.
So yeah, so I think it's like five, in the 5s or 6s, 100. And so we're always working with this lab company. And a lot of times we can, with some work and convincing and bugging the heck out of them, we can get them to bring costs down, because we do a higher volume of labs. So when you guys are all coming together and using your buying power, we can go to them and go, you know what? We want a discount because we're selling a lot of your stuff. So they actually came to us came back to us after Angelia, one of our girls at our front office, one of the ladies in the front office has been bugging the heck out of them. And they came back and said, okay, we're going to be able to do the combination of the two together for $897. And we're like, oh my God, that's great. Can you give us a discount on the gut zoomer alone if somebody just wants to do that? And they're like, nope. We're like, okay. But this is incredible because, for a couple of $100 more from, you can buy the wheat zoomer on its own, but for just literally a couple $100 more, you can get the gut zoomer added onto it. And that's incredible. That's incredible. You're getting two labs that are typically, pretty expensive. And you're getting it for $897. So we wanted to offer that to you. We're very excited. If you're interested in this, you're absolutely welcome to. Jim, together, these were not, I don't believe that they were cheaper in December, this bundle. But if they were, that's probably why Angelia went back and asked for another discount again. But they only give us what they give us. And this is the thing, we want to pass it on to you guys. So whenever they tell us that they're offering it for less, we want to make sure that we give you the education around it, so that you don't have to end up waiting later. And then you're like, oh my God, I wish I would have known that it was on sale. So we give you guys the information. We're just here to educate you. If you want it, great. If you want to get it now and save the money, great. That's even better. So we want to show you what the value is on this stuff. Because the reality is that when you can do more testing, if your budget allows you to do it, the more testing you can do, the more dialed in you can get on creating your plan of action for your health. Now, what we've done over the years, and you've probably heard this story many times, you can raise your hand if you've heard me say this. I've taken all the data from all the people in the previous years who could afford all of this testing. I feel like they have been able to bless the people that we're able to help now, because we grabbed all of their data. And we saw the common denominators across the board, no matter what you've got going on with you, if it's brain related, chronic fatigue, autoimmune, GI related, whatever. And we've been able to put these advanced assessment forms together and understand how to take you through a process without the labs. If you can't afford the labs, we can take you through a process. That's why we teach you to track all your data, to fill out your forms, all of those things. So that if you can't afford to do the labs and you still need help, you know what, you deserve to be able to get the help, and you deserve to be able to get the help, without doing it. And if you can't afford the one-on-one expensive calls that most other doctors out there that have any type of experience, even close to what we have, they're charging $1,700 a visit, $800 a visit, $650 a visit, and so we've created this group model. And so that we can teach you and empower you. So if your budget allows to order more labs and you're like, oh my God, I want to order that, then go for it, do it. And if you can't, it's okay. Learn about it. Understand this, because one day you may get into a position where you can order some labs. But either way, we just want you to have the education around this. We want you to be empowered, because you deserve to know about your body. You deserve to understand how to interpret your blood work, your labs. What does it mean? You deserve to understand how to put protocols together. You deserve to know this stuff. And this is why we have the programs that we have, to take you through a process in an affordable way, so that you can learn how to do this stuff on your own, with or without labs. So let me know, please raise your hand. Did you guys love this? Because we want to keep bringing you this type of information and this type of education. This is our passion. This is our mission, is to educate you and empower you. We don't want to do the doctor-patient model. I used to do that years ago when Anne first met me. Anne, who did this presentation, she came to me as a patient back when I had a brick and mortar. And back then I was doing the doctor-patient model. The only difference is I was already starting to educate kind of one-on-one, but we're able to educate so much better now and reach so many more people now at a much less price than before. And so it means a lot to me that you tell us if you like this information, if this is empowering you, and if this is teaching you. And so we're here to continue doing this for you. and take our evenings, even away from our families for a little bit, so that we can educate you, because that's how passionate we are about empowering you. Thank you for the comments, Susan. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for raising your hand, all of you that raise your hands, because if you're not enjoying this, we want to go in a different direction. We want to give you what you do want to know about. We want to educate you on what's going to work for you and what's going to help you. And so please continue giving us your feedback. Let us know what you want to learn about. And thank you for joining us. We're going to open up for a little bit of Q&A. Anne's going to stay as long as she can, but she's got to go. Her daughter has, I think, a basketball game tonight. And Anne is supposed to be the mom helping serve out the cookies, and the game already started. So she may have to run.
We did not do cookies. We did healthy snacks.
I figured that they were your paleo. I figured they were your paleo cookies. Anne has the best paleo cookie recipe, guys, made with almond flour. Oh my God, it's so good. But she is going to have to run at some point. Thank you though, Anne, for doing this tonight. When you asked me to do it, I'm like, oh, this is your thing. The whole gut thing is yours. Like she knows I can do the interpretations, but not as good as Anne can do these. I do some other labs, as you know, I can dial in on all that stuff. Anne has really gotten into these since this technology came out. She just dove in head first. And I really wanted you to be able to shine tonight and show everybody your knowledge behind this and be able to educate. So thank you, Anne, for being here with us tonight. And I know you got to go get with your daughter, so I can handle the questions.
I'll stick around for a bit, because I see a lot of good ones that I'd really like to answer. So, I wish this test was around 10 years ago when I first started seeing you and when I was on my journey. And I'm sure you feel the same, because this test would have helped me personally get to my root issues so much faster. So for those of you, now going through your journey, this is a really beneficial test to help you figure out the root cause so much faster than what has been done in the past. Mm-hmm. And somebody asked about around the test, how does the lab validate the results, or, wanting to know about the lab. And for these tests, Vibrant has incredibly high accuracy rates. I know for the wheat zoomer, it's like 99, 100% accuracy. It's like the gold standard of wheat related testing on the market. I don't know the specifics on the gut zoomer, but they're using technology that other labs are not using. They're using the same technology for these tests that are used in genetic testing, that geneticists use to develop genetic testing. So they're really, we trust these results.
Yes. I'm happy to go through the Q&A, or you can go through them. I do see one question here that someone's asking. There are so many tests I'd like to order. How do I know which ones? The best way to know which ones, schedule an appointment with us. Schedule a 60-minute appointment so that we can dial into all the forms that you fill out before you come to the call. We can ask you, we know how to ask the right questions, right? Like we know how to dive in and ask the right questions so that we can help you figure out what labs that you should order, or what labs you should order first. And so this is where our expertise comes in for you. And then someone else was asking, what's the difference between a GI map and this one? That's what I was saying earlier. The GI map, we used that for years until we learned about this one. The GI map does give you some information, but it leaves a lot open for interpretation. Like there's a lot of stuff that's missing that this has, like everything that you could ever think in it. It's got every bell and whistle. It's looking at everything. The GI map is more of a basic lab interpretation of your gut. So yes, it can be useful. And if somebody came to us and was having a discussion and, and we were like, gosh, there are several labs that we want to order, and they were on a budget, we would probably defer to a GI map instead of this one because of cost. If we felt like we needed to order 2 or 3 or 4 different labs to really get a good picture of what's going on for you based off of whatever you told us in your history and your forms and all the stuff that we talked about during our call with you. And, if you're on a budget, we might go, okay, well, we want to do these 4, but your budget's not going to allow for that. So instead of ordering the gut zoomer, we might order a GI map, because it's still going to give us some information. It's just not going to give us all the information that we would, hope for, that we would optimally desire?
Mm-hmm. This question's a good one from Gail. I'll give a little more info here. Gail's asking about what's gram-positive, gram-negative bacteria mean. And I know I mentioned that a couple of times. So, bacteria is typically divided into two categories, gram-positive or gram-negative. And it really has to do with the cellular wall of the bacteria. And from our perspective, it helps us figure out what to do to address that type of bacteria. So categorizing it as gram positive, gram negative helps us figure out the plan of action. Let's see. So Carrie says, tell us more about gluten-free tests, wheat gluten tests, and requirements. So Carrie, I don't know if you were here for our last presentation, which was on the wheat zoomer. We talked about that. And that is my recommendation, is the wheat zoomer. There's other tests out there that other labs do in regards to gluten sensitivity and looking at, different peptides and different markers for inflammation in the body. I personally like the wheat zoomer because everything is in one place. It's looking for all the peptides associated with gluten and wheat reaction, as well as looking at the indicators, the earliest indicators of celiac. And so it's just the most comprehensive test and considered the most accurate.
Right.
And I'll just add one more thing. As far as requirements, I'm not sure if you're talking about, do you have to eat gluten before? If you've been gluten-free, I say still do the test, because in most cases, people are having cross-contamination or some type of gluten exposure that they're not aware of, even the most careful people. I've been gluten-free for 10 years. I can tell when I've accidentally been cross-contaminated, I know. And so, that reaction can show up on a test for up to 6 months. So, if you've had even a tiny bit 6 months ago, that's still going to show up on the test. So.
Perfect. Elena Popova, Elena, you're in Seattle, right? Or in Washington. She's asking if it makes sense to do the gut zoomer while we're still in heavy detox phase of the detox and are still taking antimicrobials. Does it make sense to do it while we're in the middle of the heavy detox, or should we wait till we're done with that before we do a gut zoomer?
I say go ahead and do it, because for a couple of reasons. What if you have something that shows up in the pathogen section that's not a parasite, that the antimicrobials you're taking are not addressing? So, there are different types of antimicrobials, different ingredients that can kill off all the bugs we talked about. What if you're dealing with something that the antimicrobials you're taking isn't addressing? So I would say do it. And as you're detoxing, you're releasing biofilm, you're peeling off those layers in the gut. So it's an opportune time to really see what's there, because you're stripping away biofilm, your gut is in a state of detox. It's going to give us information as well on the type of inflammation you're having, and is there something we need to do to address inflammation aside from what we're already doing, and how are you digesting your food during detox? That's important. If you're not digesting well, are we dealing with nutrient deficiencies? So there's a lot of reasons why I'd do it while detoxing.
Perfect. And Gayla's asking, she's saying, I'm judging my funds. Should I do the gut wheat zoomer test as my next step, or should I buy the supplements for the detox plan? I can't do both. So we can do this really, really quick. Ideally, a call would be great, guys. These are the types of things, right? Like some of the things we teach you as much as we can so you can make these judgment calls. We do as much as we can. I hope that you guys can see that. But really, really quickly, the top things that I would think of are, if you're having a lot of GI issues, let's probably go ahead and do this, because we may need to do some gut stuff with you before you go into a heavy detox. Does that make sense? If you're having a lot of GI issues, okay, you know what? Let's take a break for a second, and let's come over here. We may need to work on that, because, for example, if you're having a lot of gut issues and you notice like that you have massive, incredible bloating every time you eat, and it's super painful, that's a classic symptom of SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Okay. And so when you go on an anti-inflammatory diet, you're still going to be suffering so much every time you eat. Even if you're eating anti-inflammatory, those vegetables and those different things can really, like any food, almost any food is just going to cause your stomach to just like swell really bad. And it's a lot of incredible pain. So if you're having something like that, or you're having really bad alternating stools where you go from like, you're just like diarrhea all the time, losing your water. And then or you have like really hard stools and you can't go even to the bathroom. Don't start a heavy detox yet. Let's get the gut kind of patched. You're never going to get a full gut repair until we get the toxins and the infections out, right? But we can patch it. We can kind of like patch it up, kind of get it going, make sure that we can get some more consistency with your stools. Maybe if you have SIBO and you're having all that terrible bloating and gut pain, we may need to address that first before you go into a deep detox program. And this is why we always tell everybody, we say it all the time, guys. If you're having some kind of weird like issue like that, or you're like losing a lot of weight, or you've got raging type 2 diabetes, or your hair is falling out, or you got something really, really weird going on, please schedule an appointment. And you guys get a discount as clients of ours. If you're working with us, you get a discount on the visits. It's worth it. This is your health. This is your life you're talking about, so it's like, make the appointment and let's dial in on that with you and see if we might need to do something a little different first before you go into the deeper detoxification. Someone's asking, Anne, while you're looking at what question you want to take, someone's saying, what causes SIBO, gut indigestion, and complications of gut? All the things that we talked about earlier, stress, medications, antibiotics. If you've ever gotten food poisoning, the types of foods that you're eating, and when you're eating all these food processed stuff that's not even real food, all the stuff pretty much that you buy on the aisles of the grocery store, all the fast food, you're putting all these chemicals in your body, chemical toxins, mold toxicity, heavy metals, all of these different things can disrupt the ecosystem of your gut. Even emotional stress can. So there's a lot of different things that can, oftentimes they've compounded on top of each other over the years. And that leads to these, complicated GI type of issues. And I can tell you that we're really good at working with that, as are other holistic experts. We're probably better at that than anybody else out there. We've seen so many people that suffered going to GI doctors, going in and out of the hospitals, taking all these steroids, and that was their only answer. And these people were going to die because you can't live on steroids like that, going in and out of the hospital. And then we would get a hold of them, and 9 months later, they're no more GI issues. And so, so it's just, it can be caused from a variety of different things.
I'll answer this one because a couple people have asked if they did the testing when we did the sale bundle in December, January, and they buy this bundle, when should they retest? And so what you want to do is you want to look at your results from the first set first, and you want to see, well, what am I even addressing? So it kind of depends on what shows up on that first set of tests and what kind of protocol do we need to do to address that. And then it's going to be, 3, 4, maybe 5 months later when you would want to do the retest, just depending on what's on that first set. You'll definitely use the second set for a retest. It just depends on what we're addressing on the first set.
Yeah. Marilyn, yes, I would go ahead and buy the bundle now so that you can catch it, you can get it now while it's on sale. So that when you are ready to retest, that you are able to get it at the discount. I mean, it just makes sense because we don't know if they're going to continue this with us. sometimes if we can get enough people interested and if they're actually buying it, we get even better bargaining power and we can get them to keep that price, but they're not budging with us right now on this particular one. And then Sandra was asking about thoughts on eliminating glyphosate. So the half-life of glyphosate, meaning how quickly it comes out of the human body, is actually pretty fast. Glyphosate, unlike a lot of other chemicals, our body doesn't have a way to get them out of the body. So they accumulate. And that's one of the many things that makes them so dangerous, is that they just keep building up and building up. Glyphosate will actually come out of the body relatively quickly. With that said, we still want to reduce exposure. The best thing you can do is focus on eliminating your exposure to glyphosate in the first place. That's the best thing that you can do for yourself, is make sure that you're doing everything you can to eliminate exposure in the first place. And yes, it causes a big role in GI issues and mental health issues. I talk about that a lot in our brain and mental health masterclass and our inflammation masterclass.
Dr. V, for people who aren't in the program, and so they don't have access to that, the replays of the lab interpretations, where can they see a replay of the wheat zoomer or the blood lab interpretation that you did?
Yes. So if you registered for this class, if you're registered for this inner circle, which the only way that you would be able to get in is by registering. Unless someone shared the link with you, then you're going to have to get with them on that. Then we have your email. And what we've been doing after each inner circle call is usually we're doing it the next day because it's getting late, right? I don't want to be working till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. But the next morning, we're going to take the recording and little summary, and we'll put a link to the lab special for you, a link for like if you want to schedule with us, we'll put all that stuff in there for you in an email. So we're doing a follow-up email, including the link to the recording of tonight's call. And I mentioned at the beginning, you might have not been in here yet. A lot of you want to see the call from 2 weeks ago where we did the wheat zoomer. I'll make sure that we include the link for the wheat zoomer in also. And my team will help me to remember that in the morning. So we'll put the links to both tonight's call and the recording of the call 2 weeks ago. So you can go in and you'll have those, plus the links to order your labs. If you want to schedule with us, all of that, we'll have all of that in an email for you.
Mm-hmm. Sophia is asking if H. pylori is being tested in the gut zoomer. Yes, it is. It's one of the types of bacteria that they test for. Yes.
H. pylori can cause a lot of anxiety. I'll never forget that. We had a woman that came to us many years ago, and she was in her 60s, long silver hair. She inspired me to grow my hair out gray. And she's a surfer. She's like in her 60s. She lives out in California. And she was like, that's what she does. She's like a surfer woman instead of a surfer guy. And she came to us never having had any history of any anxiety, no mind racing, no depression, super, super healthy, right? And she's like, I don't know what happened. Like, I'm having panic attacks, all this anxiety, the mind racing, it's terrible. She had a raging H. pylori infection. And we got rid of it in right under 8 weeks. We retested her and her anxiety completely gone. And I've never seen her again. She's like, thank you, I'm feeling better. She's back out surfing every day in California. So, but just to mention, like, these bacterial infections can cause more than just GI distress. They can actually lead to some pretty severe mental health related issues that your doctor will typically never find because they're not taught this way. But since you brought up H. pylori, and I wanted to mention that story really quick. Mm-hmm. Does the GI map also test for H. pylori? I think it does. I'm like 99% sure. Yes, it does. Elena Popova was asking that. It also does test for H. pylori as well. Yes. Yes. While you're still looking in, I'll answer another one. Sandra says that you eat organic and you're still getting glyphosate. Organic food can have glyphosate. But you could also be getting it in your water supply. Even if you have an RO filter for your drinking water, if you're showering in it, your skin absorbs the chemicals within 5 seconds. You could also be getting it in other products that you're not realizing. And I mean, glyphosate, it's everywhere. This happened to me. And I talked about it when I did the blood interpretation last night, that when I did my toxin and my blood work, my tox bundle and my blood work last June or July, I was shocked at how high my glyphosate was. I was angry about it actually, because I'm super, super careful. And so this is just one of the reasons that we just have to be super diligent. And really, we are entering a time in humanity and human history where, we have to work really hard for 9 months to get these toxins out, but we really need to stay detoxing all the time on a lighter level after that. So like I use the, I use our, oh my gosh, I can't remember which one is it? Our humic fulvic. I use that all the time. Yeah. I'm sorry?
TCG.
I don't know. The TCG. I use our TCG every day. I put it in my electrolytes every single day. It's so easy, right? I even have to swallow a pill for that. I just put it in there. It's a liquid. I put it in there all the time. After what happened last year, I'm not just detoxing twice a year with Anne, in February and again in October. Like I'm doing this all year long because of what I saw in my test last year.
Gail's asking, what's the balance between taking MCT oil for short chain fatty acids versus higher lipid levels? And this is a great question. And so there's so many benefits to taking MCT oil, the healthy fats, right? We hear about MCT oil as a superfood. It's great for the gut as well. I wouldn't consider taking it for short chain fatty acids though. So I would do something like bananas, plantains, apples, those types of foods, some vegetables, some fruits, grains. But if you're eliminating grains because you're eating anti-inflammatory, then those are kind of out of the diet. Sweet potatoes, some of those foods are what's going to help provide the bacteria needed for the other bacteria in your digestive tract to create the short chain fatty acids. But the higher lipid levels, I liked this part of the question. So what's the balance between taking MCT oil and what if we're having the higher lipid levels and that fat malabsorption section showing elevated on the gut zoomer? So you want to find a balance there, because if you're taking MCT every day and you're not absorbing your fat or breaking down your fat, like that's a problem. So you need to get to the root of why you're having the fat malabsorption. And while you're doing that, I'd probably back off of the MCT oil a little bit so that we're not having high lipid levels. And so, there could be other reasons why you're having high lipid levels as well. But I definitely think there's probably some correlation there if that fat malabsorption section on your gut zoomer is out of balance. So consider why that is. And then if you're not doing any kind of digestive support like enzymes, that could be beneficial to just helping you break that down better so that your body can use it.
That's such a good one. Here's another one from anonymous attendee. Quick question. How can trauma, stress, anxiety be tested using body tests? Is there a test for that? So there's not a direct test for that necessarily. I mean, there can be some psychological testing, right? So there's you can do an ACEs questionnaire for adverse childhood experiences, trauma. There are some different psychological tests, so written things that you can fill out. But you can look secondarily at how the stress and anxiety and the trauma can be affecting your biology of your body by looking at things like your adrenal stress, like your cortisol levels, by looking at how your body is functioning, right? In terms of stress can affect your blood glucose levels. Stress can affect your blood pressure levels. It can affect a lot of different, functions. It can affect your gut. And so what's important is understanding how to create a good history for yourself. And that's another thing that we like to teach people. So if we're seeing you one-on-one, we're going to take a history on you. We're going to write everything down and we're going to get your symptoms, all the details of your symptoms. And we're going to track all of this and we're going to add some labs along with it. And we're going to look at the whole bigger picture and kind of see what's going on. You can also use biometric devices. We use that. We offer that to our clients, we got a special deal with Garmin where we can give you guys a coupon code when you're working with us, and you can get your Garmin for, I think, 15 or 20% off. And you can check your biometrics. So you can check your stress markers and like HRV and your sleep and all of these different things, and like your heart rate and all of these different things. And so there are different ways to check for that. You kind of got to use ancillary types of testing, written testing and lab testing and biometrics testing, and then a history and an understanding of like, where are you? You know, have you been in fight or flight your whole life? Or has it been like this last year that you've been stressful, or that you've been stressed and you had trauma like in the last year? And then you can compare like your old labs, how your body used to react, what your blood pressure used to be and your blood sugar used to be. Then you went through this stressful time and you're just kind of stuck in fight or flight, right? And so now you can see changes in your biological markers. And so, I mean, I hope I kind of answered that for you, but there's like roundabout ways that you can do that.
Mm-hmm. Nancy,
and water filter. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go for it. Answer the water filter. I saw that one twice already.
Yeah, Nancy, and a couple of people were asking about water filters. Water filters are super important. We like to use RO systems, reverse osmosis systems. And so, you know, if you're renting and you're not going to buy like a whole house system or an under the sink system, because maybe you're renting your house or apartment, then you can get these countertop ones. And we put it in our recent newsletter. Actually, I think our newsletter that it might've been last month, or it might be the one that's going out. I think it might've gone out today, or it goes out tomorrow. That we really like the AquaTrue. AquaTrue is nice. They've got a variety of different RO filters. They have one that's a countertop one that's kind of sleek looking. And then they have an under the sink one, and they have a whole house one. And so check on our website and go to media up at the top. I'm going to be rearranging and doing some like house rearranging on the website soon. But if you go to the top, there's a one that says media, and then there's a drop down, and you can see our Crusaders for Health newsletter in there. You can go in there and look at last month, maybe check December also, but I think we might also be putting it in this month's newsletter as well, because we're always having people asking us about that. And we've got a special link in there where you can get a discount on your water filter if you want to do that, save a little money.
Yes. Let me answer this one from Nancy. She said, what do high Streptococcus and Staphylococcus species readings indicate? So people ask that all the time after looking at the gut zoomer and seeing all the things that they test for. So strep and staph are common viruses bacteria viruses that we tend to have in our body anyway. If you've ever had an exposure in the past to a virus or even many types of bacteria, you're going to have that remain in the body to a degree. So when you've had, for example, a viral infection, you will eliminate the activity of the virus, so to speak, and your body sort of puts it in remission. So you'll always have the remnants of that virus in the body, and same thing with many bacterias. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a staph infection. I think that's where you're going with that, Nancy, because you say I was recently in the hospital, and so don't be concerned about that.
Yeah. So the staph bacteria and the strep bacteria and all these different other, co-infections that a lot of viruses hang out with those guys. They like to hang out together. They're of different strains. So if you were in the hospital, for example, for a staph infection somewhere in your body, it could have been a different strain. So there's 5 or more different strains. And I don't study that. I can go in and look it up in my reference manuals and stuff. I mean, that's not something that I can tell you off the top of my head, and neither can Anne, but it's likely that it was a different strain. And we do typically have a little bit of staph or strep in our GI system. A little bit. It's kind of like when you have a really healthy yard and the grass is super thick in the yard and it chokes out the weeds. You only have 1 or 2 weeds that come up. You know what I'm saying? Every week you might have maybe one weed every week or every 2 weeks, because you've got a healthy ecosystem in your yard. The grass is super thick. It chokes it out. When the ecosystem gets compromised in the yard, the weeds start coming up everywhere. The weeds take over. It's the same thing with our gut, with our entire GI tract. We have a little bit of candida. We have a little staph. We have a little strep. We have a little E. coli even. That can happen. But when your gut ecosystem is healthy, all the good bacteria choke them out. They just choke them out and they don't ever let them overgrow and take over. But if you ever take an antibiotic or you're taking certain medications or you get a lot of glyphosate exposure, which is really bad for your gut, or other types of chemicals or stress or a combination of these different things that disrupts the ecosystem of your GI tract, that's when the weeds can start overgrowing. That's when the staph and the strep and the candida and the E. coli can really start growing out of control at that point. And that's where we need to then intervene and show you how to get that ecosystem back under control.
I like that analogy of the yard with the grass and the weed. That's a good one.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I think we've answered pretty much most everything. Thank you everybody for coming. We love you guys, and we're here. We get so passionate about educating you. We love doing that. And we've got some new faces that you're going to get to meet soon. One of them joined in the back end tonight with you guys watching. And we've got some new faces with some of the top people. We're getting ready to add some more amazing humans onto our team. And they're also going to be joining in and sharing their expertise and their knowledge with you so that you can gain sovereignty back over your health, because you deserve to be able to understand this stuff without having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get your degrees and your certificates. We want to share everything that we know with you so that you can get your health back and learn how to pass this stuff down to your children and your grandchildren. So thank you so much for joining us. We love you guys so freaking much. We love you, love you, love you. So we'll be talking to you soon. We've got our next Inner Circle Live coming up in 2 weeks. Don't forget to go to mhhinnercircle.com, and you can see the list of all the topics that we're going to be talking about. Stay in touch with us, and we will talk with you soon. Bye, everyone.